Hello. Thank you for tuning in to our Volunteer Supervisor training for the Association of Fraternity and Sorority Advisors. My name is Branden Stewart, and I am the coordinator of volunteer and member engagement for the association. I would like to invite anyone to view the information in this video to learn more about our volunteer process, but please know that the information presented is most relevant for those in a supervisory role. Our team is looking forward to working with all of our volunteers in the coming year, and we want to thank and acknowledge you specifically for the work you have contributed to the association in the past and the work we know you'll be doing in the upcoming year. Our hope today is that you'll be more familiar with the association's expectations for volunteer leaders, our policies, and our services. Although your appointment letter indicated you'll be appointed for next year, we want to stress that your new role begins now. For our volunteer leaders, we believe that in order for you to be most effective, you must begin thinking now about your new role instead of waiting for the annual meeting. We have provided you with the AFA Volunteer Supervisor Toolkit and all of the documents and information you need to get started for your upcoming year, and want to supplement that information with this video. Our three primary objectives today are to go over the AFA volunteer policies, procedures, and forms, provide you with volunteering tips and tools, and briefly go over the transitioning process and timeline. As you can see on your screen, we will be following this outline. We do want to start off by highlighting a few resources from the AFA Standard Operating Procedures Manual that you should be familiar with. These documents are found within the Standard Operating Procedures Manual, but can easily be accessed off the AFA website in the Volunteer Resources section. The four are the Project Plan Report Form, the Status Report Form, the Board Proposal Form, and the Budget Request Form. The Project Plan Report Form allows you to shape your work plan and state how you will achieve success in your role. The Project Plan form is to be completed by all volunteer leaders and submitted to your volunteer supervisor with a CC to me no later than November 9th. This is essentially your outline for your work ahead and should explain how your volunteer group expects to work together and meet the expectations established in the position description. As well, new initiatives should be thoroughly described and explained. Obviously, if you're a volunteer leader who supervises others, you want to and need to involve those you supervise in the creation of your group's project plan. The project plans are tentative pending the review and approval of your volunteer supervisor. You should expect to receive feedback on this document from your volunteer supervisor by the annual meeting. Each of you will also be asked to lead a committee or work group meeting at the meeting. These meetings should occur during the second half of the Volunteer Welcome Program and are designed to be working meetings. Since you've already spent time engaging the committee in the work of the group, it will be easy to get right into business and not spend your time trying to review basics or doing icebreakers. If this meeting is handled well, and you've done all the other preparation work above, there should be no need for a January conference call. Your project plan is your guiding outline for this meeting. The next form I want to review with you is the Status Report Form. The purpose of the Status Report Form is to provide an opportunity for you to update and track your progress at least quarterly with your volunteer supervisor. Depending on your position and your supervisor, some volunteers may be asked to submit the Status Report Form more frequently than quarterly. But at the very least, all volunteers will submit this information 4 times a year by the following dates: January 31st, April 30th, July 31st, and October 31st. These forms will be reviewed by your volunteer supervisor immediately following the stated deadlines. The intent is to help volunteers stay on track with projects and initiatives, as well as to provide a systematic way for the board to provide feedback, support, and additional direction. Copies should be kept for transition materials for the next person to fill your role, so that they have a solid timeline of how and when things should occur. The next form we will highlight is the Board Proposal Form, which should be used anytime you want to request specific action from the Executive Board. This could include changing a policy, adopting a new resolution, amending the bylaws, or starting a new program or service. If you need funding for something that has not been budgeted, you can also submit a Board Proposal Form for consideration. Basically, anything that should be considered within the larger scope of the association's overall priorities and budget should be submitted as a board proposal. If you are unsure about whether or not something should be proposed to the board, your supervisor should be able to help you determine an appropriate course of action. All board proposal forms must come through your volunteer supervisor, and you will work directly with your supervisor to submit your proposal. The final form we'd like to talk about is the Budget Request Form. This pertains to budget requests for the upcoming fiscal year and is due May 1st. The association's fiscal year is July 1st through June 30th. In May, the Finance Committee, led by the Vice President for Administration and Finance, begins developing the next year's budget. If your position currently has a budget, or if you think your position should have a budget in the future, you should submit budget request forms for every expenditure you anticipate. Each project, activity, program, or travel request should be submitted on a separate form. If your committee or work group is responsible for creating a new program or service, you'll need to determine your anticipated income and expenses in the spring so you can submit a budget request form by May 1st. You should work with your supervisor to compile the information for the budget request. The Volunteer Guidelines section of the Standard Operating Procedures Manual outlines general expectations for volunteer leaders. This includes several different topics, but I especially want to hit on the correspondence section. It is critical that you copy your supervisor on any communication that you conduct in your AFA role so that everyone involved is knowledgeable about what is happening. Also, please be conscious of how and when you use your AFA title. You are encouraged to use your title when you are communicating in an AFA capacity. However, please do not include your AFA title in your standard email signature because you are not always acting on behalf of the association. Each month, we publish the AFA Volunteer Newsletter. Volunteer leaders are expected to nominate a volunteer each month for the Volunteer of the Month, as well as to submit any pertinent updates that other volunteers should know. The deadline for submission is the second Wednesday of each month, and the newsletter comes out on the following Wednesday. I'd now like to talk about managing volunteers from a distance. It requires discipline and good communication skills. Set up communication expectations for yourself. At the very least, you should be communicating with those with whom you are working no less than 2 times per month. Obviously, some months will carry a greater workload, but at the very least, this should be your minimum goal. Try to vary your communication as well and figure out what communication methods work best for your committee. Some people work well over email, and some prefer conference calls, while others appreciate a personal call to discuss projects. In addition, think through your projects to allow for meaningful work to be done by those volunteers who report to you. As the manager of distance volunteers, you can't wait until the last minute to pull it all together. It requires giving your committee or work group plenty of lead time so they can have significant and meaningful experiences in their volunteer roles. While there are many useful items that the association provides you in your volunteer role, we believe that one of the most useful is the AFA Standard Operating Procedures Manual. We've referenced this a few times already in the video, and a link to the 2012 manual was included in your volunteer toolkit, while the 2013 manual is currently going under revision. The Standard Operating Procedures Manual is essentially your guidebook for any policies or procedures that you should be aware of as you carry out your duties for the association. The other tool I'd like to highlight is the position description. You might not think of this as a tool, but it's perhaps the most important document you have for your upcoming year. It is your roadmap for your position and contains a position impact statement and indicators for success. Basically, all the information you and your committee need to have in order to be successful in this new role. Please make sure that you are regularly reviewing this document with any committee members so that they feel engaged in the purpose of the work that you're gathering to do. Nothing makes us sadder than when you contact us mid-year and say, "What is this position description? I have no idea what this document is." This past year, we engaged in a major and thorough review of all volunteer position descriptions, so it is our hope that you are finding this document helpful. Finally, let's talk about the transition and timeline. We have all experienced or watched students experience the pitfalls of not ensuring a solid transition into and or out of a leadership position. Don't let this be your experience. It may take your initiative to make these things happen, but they are a priority. The transition basics are outlined in the toolkit I sent you. These are also listed on this slide. Our expectation of all volunteer leaders is that you will transition with both your predecessor and your incoming supervisor no later than Friday, November 9th. By now, you should have already reached out to the volunteers you supervise to welcome them aboard. If you have not yet done so, please make this a priority. The project plans that were discussed earlier are due a few days later on November 13th. Please include your committee in the discussion of creating these. You'll receive feedback on your project plan before November 28th, which is the day of our volunteer welcome program. Thanks for tuning in, and a big thank you again for agreeing to serve as a volunteer leader this year. We hope to offer a menu of video training opportunities for our volunteer leaders and volunteers within the coming months. If you need to contact me, my information is available on our website and is also present on the current slide. Again, thanks for agreeing to serve, and thanks for helping us to make 2013 a great year for the association.